26 years ago, Julie and I became the first married couple of Rotary because I met Julie when she was in Rotaract. We married, she became a member of this club. And 25 years ago, we welcomed the first Rotary baby, our beautiful, bouncy baby girl, Alexandra. Now, Alexandra looks a little bit different these days as Alexander, and he's here to tell you all about it. And I could go on and on and on about what an amazing man he is, but I want you to hear it from him. Rotarians, guests, I'm very, very, very proud to present my son, Alexander.
Wow, this is amazing. First of all, thank you, President Pat. Thanks for having me out here. And thank you to Rotarians, guests, everyone. It's an incredible turnout. And I am extremely, extremely thankful for everyone being here. It's unbelievable. So a lot of people who have known me may remember that kid right there with the blonde hair. I was really a bouncing bundle of joy for a long time. I suffer from something called gender dysphoria, which means there's a disconnect from what my brain tells me and what my body is. Every ounce of me tells me that I was meant to be a boy, meant to be a man, but unfortunately the genetics and stuff like that didn't add up, and it's something that I can explain to you, but you won't fully understand unless you live it. It affected my everyday life. I was depressed, I was suicidal, and I felt trapped in my own body. I was always very masculine growing up. I never really had the traditional femininity. I don't even like labeling things as masculine or feminine because I feel like whatever you like, you like. But I was never your traditional girly girl. And my parents accepted that. And that's helped me develop into the person I am today. They've never judged me for anything. I'm a rabid Toronto Argonauts fan. Always have been my entire life, and that organization I can't say enough great things about. So I was raised very, I like to say liberally. I know a lot of people are raised differently, and people are being raised gender neutral, and that's fantastic. But I was raised female, but very liberal female. My parents let me do what I wanted. They let me play sports. And I didn't really know about what was going on with me, but something felt off. And I never felt right in my own body. It's hard to explain because it's something you really have to feel. And it's something deep-seated inside of you, and painful, and there's not a whole lot that can be done. So I spent most of my life in the Kawartha Lakes region. After a lot of bullying in Toronto, I was born here and raised until I was about 11. And unfortunately, what happens when someone doesn't fit a gender norm or a gender stereotype is they're isolated, because girls are expected in elementary school to hang out with the girls, whereas boys are expected to hang out with the boys. So that isolated me for a lot of my life, because I knew I didn't fit in with the girls, because I didn't have anything in common with them, but the boys didn't want anything to do with me. So I spent most of my life isolated, completely alone besides my family. And it was difficult. It's hard to express what a community is, how important it is, and even the community of friends at school. If you don't have friends at school, you don't feel like you're worth anything, and it's hard. And bullying is one thing that really needs to stop. It isolates someone to the point where their mental health debilitates. It's debilitating, and it's a horrible thing. So this is me when I was a teenager. As you can see, I'm a lot more smiley now. I'm a lot more happy of a person. My teenage years were so hard, and it's hard to explain what it's like hitting puberty in the wrong body. When puberty happened, everything went wrong for me. I was severely depressed. I didn't graduate high school till I was 20 because my depression was so debilitating. I started developing severe anxiety. I started presenting suicidal ideations and tendencies, and it was a bad time for everyone involved, and my entire family stuck by me. Thank God. I thank God every day for my family, because I wouldn't be here without them. And the thing is, when you don't fit into a norm of what society tells you, it can cause other people to view you as quote unquote a freak or a misfit or an outcast of society. The reality is, I'm no different than any of you. I'm a young man, I'm getting an education, I have great groups of friends, I'm no different than anyone else. And what needs to stop is this categorization of people being weird or different or freaky, because realistically, everyone is just a person deep down. Everyone has a heart, everyone has a soul, and people understand the names you call them and the things you say. So I was getting very moody in my teen years, and it was a lot to deal with, honestly. I felt isolated from a lot of things that other kids did. Dating was normal for the most part. It was a little bit weird, but I felt like I was lacking something, and I felt like the core of myself was wrong. Unfortunately, I was born in '92, raised in the '90s, and we didn't have the type of exposure that's going on now. We had Chaz Bono, but I had never even heard of Chaz Bono. I was too young. So I didn't figure out what was going on until a much later age. And life was really dark. Around this time, I was sent off to try and go get help in America, to a therapeutic boarding school, because I was out of control. I was having rage flashes. I was hurting my own family. I was hurting myself, and they couldn't take care of me here in Ontario. And the only thing that my parents could do was send me to Vermont to go to a treatment facility for at-risk youth. And I'd love to say it helped, but it was more of a last minute, we don't have an option at this point thing. And I spent a lot of my life in boarding schools, just trying to figure out what was going on with me. I got 1,000 diagnoses. I got everything from bipolar to mild schizophrenia to major depressive disorder, and no one caught this. And it's having gender dysphoria, it's hard to catch because it does present with a lot of counter symptoms like depression, the anxiety, the angry outbursts. But my experience isn't what other people experience too. People can go through life with gender dysphoria and not even really present symptoms other than one. Like, say someone has gender dysphoria, they might just present anxiety, or they might present 50 other symptoms. There's no one story that's the same. And that's what's so interesting about being transgender is I can meet someone on the street and we have a commonality, but we're not the same. And our stories will always be completely different. Our symptoms will be different. And the thing is, what we need right now is exposure, and we need representation, because it's getting better, but it's not enough. I didn't know what a transgender person was growing up. If I had known, I would be able to have been myself for all these years instead of living a lie. And that's the most painful part, is without that representation, the next generation won't know what's going on. And things were really hard for a long time. But then I found out. I went to school one day, and a classmate of mine told me that he was going by Jake now, and that he was a boy. And I had no idea that was even a thing. Sat my mom and dad down. I said, I have something really important to tell you. My mom immediately asked if I was pregnant. I was not. And I said, I am a boy. And I expected a huge reaction. I expected to be disowned, but they went with it. And the next day, my dad was on the phone with everyone he knew trying to get me testosterone. I carried on pre-transition, pre-testosterone for a while, and I knew I had to get testosterone to be myself. It's not something that other people per se have to get to feel themselves, but it was something for me personally. Because when you look at gender, it's a spectrum. There's so many different ways of expressing gender. There's even stuff like gender queer, which is you don't feel like either or you feel like both at the same time. There's no right way to express who you are and if you're masculine or feminine. That's me before I could grow any facial hair. I thought I would shave before the cottage. That was laughable. So the thing with testosterone is it changes not only your mental state, but it also does all these crazy physical changes. It deepens your voice. Obviously, I wasn't born with this voice. It causes you to grow a lot of body hair, facial hair. Sometimes it makes the Adam's apple pop, but it didn't for me, unfortunately. And it does a lot to your emotional state. There's a big myth that goes on that if someone is taking testosterone, they are aggressive. I was more aggressive before I started taking testosterone. I am now one of those people who is a peacekeeper, and I don't advocate violence or anything, and I haven't had an outburst in probably about 10-ish years now. It definitely changes your body shape too. I was always very round around the midsection, and testosterone causes fat distribution to go up to the shoulders to give you a more masculine appearance. It also makes me bulk on muscle, and it's been life-changing. It's given me partially the body that I've wanted. I'll get into that more, but it's given me a lot of the changes that I wanted to see and that I pictured when I looked in the mirror. And this is my testosterone. This is when I started. This was my first week, and nothing really happened for me for a good while. And it was frustrating because I do something that is not great, and I go online and I look at other trans guys and see their progress that they've made, and this is a phenomenon called trans jealousy. It's when you are transgender and you compare yourself every single day to every other transgender person you see, and if they're progressing faster than you, you are really upset. And I've actually I've had moments where I've broken down because I feel like I'm not progressing fast enough. Testosterone and the awareness changed me. Having a doctor who believed me, I was discounted by so many doctors. So many people looked at me and said, "You're not transgender. You're just confused. You're just bipolar and you're having a mood swing. You're not actually a boy." Having that one doctor who listened to me, said, "I believe you. I will get you into a specialist." It changed my life. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't seen someone who understood. And I'm covered in tattoos, but my most meaningful tattoo is a 16 on my arm because my parents didn't think I was going to live past 16. I was so suicidal and attempting suicide every other day that they were preparing themselves for my death. And for me to be 25, almost 10 years later, standing up here talking to you is the most unbelievable feeling. That's about 6 months on testosterone, which I saw so many people with beards at that time, and all I had wanted was a beard. And it affected my self-esteem severely. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I didn't know why my genetics weren't working with me, because my brother can grow a full beard. My dad can grow a full beard when he wants to. And my genetics just weren't working with me for some reason. And eventually, slowly, it got better. My mood started increasing. I started becoming the man that I pictured myself to be. And that was the best feeling of my life. I had been fighting for my right to be who I was for so long. To have something like this pay off, it was an unbelievable feeling. And I can't thank my medical team enough they saved me along with my family. If I hadn't had my family and my medical team, there's no way I would be here today. As you can see what I was talking about with the redistribution, you can see the shoulders getting broader and the waist getting a bit more boxed off. That was the first thing that changed on me, was my whole body shape. And a lot of times you think that you'd be happy with any change, but it's freaky going from living in the same body that you've been living in for so long to having a completely different body shape and completely different body size. It was an adjustment period, but I grew to love it. I grew to become more confident in who I was. And my beard started growing in, which is what I'd wanted from the start. And now I have a pretty good beard. So a lot of what needs to be talked about is people need to start talking about trans people in general. We're very underrepresented, and I genuinely worry for the next generations to come. And I've told everyone that I will not stop advocating until I can ensure a better future so people don't have to go through what I went through. And that's why I've been an activist for the last couple of years. That's why I've been doing speeches like this, because when you're faced to an issue, it makes a world of difference. And this was my trip over the summer. This was the first time I felt confident enough to go into a public, well, it was a hot springs, but technically a giant pool. I hadn't gone into any type of public pool in about 6-7 years, because I was scared of what other guys would say, if people would stare at me weird. It's a scary thing, and I still fear that, even though I can, quote unquote, I hate this term, but pass. It still scares me what if people find out. I face danger, but I do not face as much danger as trans women, and specifically trans women of color. They are the most murdered trans people in the world. And we really need to start talking about trans women of color and what we're going to do about this. This was also in Alberta. I went to go visit my amazing girlfriend who's here, her family. And it was unbelievable. It was the first time I really felt free. I was up in the mountains, and it was such a sense of calm and a sense of well-being. And that is me at the Pride Parade. As you can see throughout the slideshow, I start getting more and more confident, and I start becoming the person that I know I was meant to be since birth. And this is something that my parents never saw coming. I am 3 credits away from graduating at Humber College and moving on to my bachelor's, master's, and then hopefully I pray my PhD. If you had asked them 3 years ago, they would have said, no way. There's no way Alex is going to graduate. But I did it, and it's all because I was able to be myself, and I was able to. The testosterone helped so much with my motivation, and being yourself, being true to yourself is the best gift that you can give yourself. And with that, if there's anyone who knows anyone who's transgender, my best advice is accept them. My parents didn't see this coming. They wouldn't have believed you if you told them that they would have a transgender son. It's not a choice that I made, and that's a question I get a lot. When did you decide to become transgender? This isn't something I choose. I have to undergo injections every single week, and the needles are large and painful. I have to undergo so many hours of surgery just to be myself. And to have someone come up to me and say, when did you decide, is almost insulting, because if I could choose, I would have chosen to be female, because I could have lived a perfectly normal life. But that denial of self is worse than the consequences of surgery or injections every week. Another question I get a lot is, did you learn about transgender things when you were young? Is that why? No, I grew up in a cookie cutter household. This can happen to anyone. I'm the key example of that. And the most important thing is that you need to remember this could be your child, this could be your sibling, this could be your niece or nephew, your cousin, your spouse. This could be anyone. And it's becoming more and more well known now. We need to keep advocating for people like me. We need to make sure that the future is brighter, because I can guarantee if I had had a clue that I was transgender, my life would have gone differently. It would have been a lot more smooth. And I don't want the next generation to have to suffer through prejudice and transphobia the way that I did, especially growing up in small areas. It's still running rampant. And it's scary, and I worry, but since I've lived in Toronto, which I will without hesitation call my favorite city in the entire world, there's so much being done here, and it's so relieving. There are groups, there are activists, the representation is happening here, but we need to spread that out to the world. We need to show people that men like me or women like anyone that you could know are normal people. And we just want to live the way we want to, authentically. And with that, I think I'm just about done, but could I request just a moment of silence? The transgender murders are rising drastically, and I would like a moment of silence for all those transgender people who have been murdered this year. Thank you so much.
said that if there's anybody who has any questions, he'd be happy to take about 3 questions.
It's hard to say. Are there more transgender people now than there were? It's hard to say. People are more comfortable coming out now. I think there always were transgender people and always were a good amount of them, but a lot of people were uncomfortable to come out due to violence, stigma, just being rejected from society. So it's hard to say. I would love to look into that and do a study on that, but it's very probable they didn't feel safe before. Sorry, I could not hear you. Oh, you want to know if there are any organizations like for other parts of the world? There are a lot going on in Canada and America. I don't know too much about other areas of the world. Unfortunately, again, it's something I really would love to research. But certain cultures do accept it more than other cultures, right? If you look in within Indigenous culture, they have two-spirit people who are very similar to transgender people. When you look in Thailand, they're very accepting too. So I'm not sure about organizations worldwide, but I know that Canada and America are working on it. Yeah.
Would you be interested in being a speaker at the World Parliament of Religions is gathering in Toronto 2018? 20,000 people are coming to Toronto November 1st to 7th to answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be honored. Yeah, it would be an honor.
We've got time to research.
Yeah.
If I may, this is a question more for the parents. How did you get through this? I know it's hard. I mean, not the suicide or the depression. There must have been times when it was so hard for you. What kept you going? How do you ever even to one still not?
Yeah, why not?
I think it was day by day. Throughout Alex's entire experiences, we never lost sight day by day of who Alex was before the issue started. And we just kept that compartmentalized and saying, that was Alex. Alex has always been a good, great value, wonderful kid. This is today, this isn't going so well. Okay, this is tomorrow, that's going even worse. So we just kept going day by day. We didn't ever sit there and say, this is all going to resolve in a year. Alex is going to come to at the time her senses and stop making everybody and herself crazy. So I think if you sit there day by day, and as we went along day by day, we listened more and more. And as Alex would go along and start saying things to us, so we became less sort of, well, you're our child, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way we look at it. And we became more, okay, we're listening to you and what you're saying to us, and we're starting to listen more. So by the time Alex declared that he was transgender, it was funny because we just went, okay, yeah. Where to start from here? You know, it was much a very gradual process over a very long period of time.
I can take one more, but I'll be hanging around here. Yeah, yeah.
So I have a 12-year-old son who has been in the same class for his entire elementary school career and now junior high with a boy named Eric who is quite clear, maybe not transgender, but quite clearly relates more to the girls and dresses like a girl. And trying to explain to a 12-year-old boy where bullying, I believe, probably still exists, that this is normal and okay. Do
Mhm.
and then to almost be a leader in trying to get rid of the bullying and lessen the bullying?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. For me, a lot of it was no one stood up. Teach your kids to stand up. I'm a firm believer in erasing masculinity and femininity. And I find that kids are a lot more accepting than a lot of my peers or adults are. Luckily, with kids, they kind of bounce back and say, okay, this is who you are. But the best advice I can give is to teach kids to stand up and be leaders and kind of normalize it. Maybe even watch a few documentaries, stuff like that. Just education is the key to stopping stuff like this. And the more educated that a kid can be, first of all, they're better off in life. But second of all, they're able to be aware of these issues and tend to accept them easier. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing your story with us. I know that not one of us really knows just how it feels, but let us try to understand how you feel, along with the others that are also misunderstood. We share your pain, and we will be there for you and others. We're very proud of you, Alex, your family, your accomplishments, and your determination to educate the world about trans. We stand with you and have your back. And as a thank you for speaking to us today, Alex, a donation has been made in your honor to Shelterbox Canada. Shelterbox is a cutting-edge disaster relief charity which hand-delivers shelter and supplies to families affected by natural disasters and conflict. Their signature shelter boxes and shelter kits contain the tools needed to rebuild communities and transform lives. All aid is customized to meet the specific needs of the family so that they can not only survive but recover from disaster. Shelterbox teams will go to the ends of the earth to ensure no family is left without shelter after disasters. Shelterbox is a Rotary International project partner. This donation is made in partnership with Rotary Club of Toronto's International Service Committee. Next week, October 20th, we'll be back at the Fairmont in the Upper Canada Room.